Hey Chloe, it's Thursday, October 17th, which is in fact a prime number. So a few days ago I discovered this video of an Icelandic indie folk band singing an Icelandic hymn written in the very early 13th century. And when I first finished it, there were two things that amazed me. Thing one, the music itself. Like, I know I'm not a musicologist or an expert in music history or anything, but that didn't really sound like pre-Renaissance harmony to me. Maybe it's just because I don't remember anything before the Renaissance period, because I believe that music really started making sense around that time. Well, to be fair, we did only study the music of France, England, Germany, and Italy. We never really went far north to Scandinavia, or even further north to off of the European continent. So if there's anybody that remembers more about music history than I do and can give me an explanation about that, please do. Okay, that was a pretty bad cry for help. The second thing that amazed me was the fact that they all knew the song by heart. Side note, I'm amazed that in one band they have all the necessary voice parts needed to sing a hymn like that. The fact that they know the song makes sense. They're Icelandic, the hymn is Icelandic, everything lines up. Oh wait, remember that the hymn that they're singing is about twice as old as the American colonies. Not the country, the colonies. Also about 400 years older than, gravity. And that's a little bit mind-blowing considering that the oldest song I've sung in a choral setting was a carol from the 1400s. But that doesn't even touch the Icelandic hymn as far as oldness. And we can still interpret the mixed voices arrangement of the hymn even though it was written about 200 years before the invention of the printing press, which was another 200 years before it started being widely used. So it's an old song, great, but does that make it a better or more interesting song? Arguably, yes, but also arguably... Here's my question, Chloe. The American side of Tumblr has completely blown up over this performance of this hymn. But why? I mean, if we're looking to folk music, there's plenty of American folk music. Why don't we just look to that? There are a few answers to this question. One of the most obvious answers is that of harmony. Scandinavian harmony is different from English harmony, is different from German harmony, Italian, French, all the way across the pond to American harmony. And you can tell this just by listening to American versus English folk music. Like, take the soundtrack to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and put it next to any English carol that you've ever heard. And different harmonies are aesthetically pleasing to different types of people. Like, I myself prefer mostly English and Italian harmony over French and German. Although in more recent times, these country lines have been kind of a mushy mess. The second reason why we generally tend to ignore American folk music is the fact that we're still being exposed to it. Many Appalachian folk tunes were recorded in the 1920s, which means that our grandparents were generally born and grew up in the time this music was remaining popular, which means that we're in the third generation of this music, and we're still riding off of the era when these songs were composed. So they're old-fashioned songs, but they haven't quite reached that category of ancient. It's kind of like when you have a car and it gets older and older and people don't like it as much until it hits a certain point and then it's considered classic. Of course, for music, we don't really have a definite line where it's determined classic. For the third reason, we kind of have to go back to when we were talking about recording music. American folk tunes were really the first songs to be recorded and widely published outside of sheet music. So what we have of those songs are the original recordings of the original composer singing their original piece. Original is the operative word here. When you listen to a group like Arstadir singing Higher Hymna Smidur, you're hearing a modern interpretation of that ancient hymn. If you want to hear the song being sung by people in the context of when it was written, people who may have known the composer, people who lived in the time when that was at its peak popularity, and that kind of music was relevant all over that culture, we're kind of out of luck. And that's why I think we're justified in romanticizing really old music. There's a blanket of mystery over it that will not, and in my opinion, should not ever be taken away. I'll see you on Tuesday.